Okay, compositional form and development, part 2. In the previous video, I played around with some ways we can gradually introduce the content of this loop. In this video, I'm going to show some ways we can play with the pacing of the actual loop, and hopefully you'll get some ideas of how you can develop your own loops and compositions. So right now, this loop is only using C in the bass and C minor pentatonic scale in the other parts. When you listen to it on its own, as a composer, you might want to make a change at a certain point. And where you make those changes might determine the pacing of the rest of the composition. For example, after one pass of this loop, maybe the bass should change notes to D sharp. So I'm going to take this and copy it into 5. I'm going to take SFX number 9 and copy it into a blank SFX. And let's transpose it up to D sharp. And let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that sounds all right, but we've created this mini A-B structure in the pattern editor. The A section with the bass note on C and the B section with the note on D sharp. We could articulate these changes in other parts too, but I think maybe for this video I'll just focus on the bass. So I think what we could do, we could probably even repeat this again and kind of do an ABAB form. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that's okay. I think definitely after hearing this 4 times, if we move on to pattern 8, there would have to be a drastic change here rather than looping back to 4. The other thing, maybe what we could do is change pattern 6 so that the bass moves to a different note. So let's move it to F. And we'll hear what that sounds like. Yeah, that's okay. One thing I am noticing that it gets a little dry here, even though we've changed the notes. It's still like it gets a little laggy, and I'm thinking maybe what we could do is, I mean, if you look at the bass part is changing at a consistent pace every pattern. It only changes notes in the same place at the beginning of a pattern. So what would happen if we took this pattern 22 and maybe move this back down to G sharp? Now in pattern 7, we're already on D sharp, so I'm just going to make this back pattern 9. Let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, that's all right. So we have this A, B, C, A structure, and C is kind of the height of the tension, which is articulated by the motion to a new note, but also that the pacing of the bass has been doubled. Sometimes it can be helpful to think of composing as playing with these kinds of ratios and proportions. Another note about using letters like A, B, and C, for me, an A section doesn't just represent the musical content, but it also represents a point of familiarity and stability. It's where you can release the tension you've built up from other sections. Of course, you can create a form that never returns to A, and maybe you create familiarity and stability in other ways, or maybe you don't want familiarity and stability at all in your composition. These are all good options. So let's listen to this again and listen to it in terms of that familiarity and tension built up. And then at 7, you should feel this release, this kind of I'm back at home base feeling. Yeah, so there's an option, and we could repeat this again, and maybe the second time there's a melody that comes in. Another option could be, we could probably expand this even more. Let's repeat 4 and 5 again. And what would happen if we go to F here? And I don't know what we're going to do here, so we'll just leave this blank. So we're going to start here. This is kind of our original A, B, A, B, and then this is going to be the major point of change. So I'm just shifting these around to hear what it sounds like. So these 4 are going to feel fairly stable, and then by the end of 7, we're going to want to anticipate a new change. Yeah, and then here we could probably go back to our A. So actually what we could do is just repeat that and then go back here. So let's listen to this again. Of course, there's lots of listening back and forth, listening to these big sections, because we're listening for that pacing, that rate of development and change throughout the composition. Here. Yeah, so we've kind of created this bigger structure now. We have our A section here, and then another A section here, and then a B section, which is kind of the height of the tension, and then back to A. I think another important thing to keep in mind is the consistency in which that the composition is changing. So you're setting up a certain pacing of the bass changes at the beginning of every pattern, and then it doubles its change here when it moves to F, and then D sharp, and then that happens again, and then it goes back to the original pacing. And so there's a kind of consistency in the way it's developing. If I took, let's say, one of these, and let's say 8, and I really drastically changed its content. So I'm just picking some random notes here. What we're going to hear, I anticipate is that things are going to be, the change and the rate of change is going to be a little bit too drastic. So we're going to hear that here at 8. Yeah, it all of a sudden kind of gets weird here, and maybe that's an effect you're going for. Maybe that is appropriate for the context of the composition, but it's just something for you to listen out for, is the consistency of the development. And is this is this rate of change unified throughout the composition? So now I'm going to rewind and go back to the original loop and play with that. This form, this AABA form, was created because we assumed it would follow a certain pacing or rate of development, which was mostly determined by the movement of the bass. So what would happen if we made certain changes to the loop itself? For example, let's take this bass line and change it here. Or maybe let's just go back to C in the last 8 rows. Or let's move this back to D sharp and make this C. See what that sounds like. We could also make this D sharp, and let's make this F. All still notes of the C minor pentatonic scale. Yeah, that's pretty good. So now if we use this as our starting point, then that might change the form. Well, it definitely will change the rate in which things are changing throughout pattern 5, 6, and 7, 8. And what we've done here is now created a different compositional path to explore. Maybe it will end up being AABA, or maybe it'll be something else. The bass is changing at a different rate, and so maybe now instead of it changing every 8 rows, maybe for the next pattern it should change every 16 rows, or maybe it should change every 32 rows. But the point here is that in playing with the original loop and the original pacing of the bass line, we've created a different path to explore in developing this composition. Hopefully that gives you some ideas to apply to your own compositions. Maybe what I'll do for a future video is develop this further and maybe even create a larger section, another section, like in section 12, 13, maybe add a melody and talk about ways that you can transition between larger sections. Maybe I'll do a video on that next. But anyways, hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. GruberMusic.com.